Hey guys, welcome back in. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be sort of all over the map, but I am trying to follow a singular thread in what I'm going to say. So just go with me on this. I beg your indulgence. Over the past several weeks, and really the past 2 months, there have been a slew of announcements from tech companies about agents, agentic workflows. And this is really looking like the next step in this large language model world that we're living in. And subsequently, there has been, a spate of articles covering this very thing about agents in the workplace and helping you be more efficient in completing your task and so forth. Now, we have talked about agents here extensively, but it appears that agents are without a doubt, that next step for LLMs, or that's what the tech companies are putting their money on, or that's the next play that they're running. If you've missed previous episodes in which we discussed agents or agentic workflows, I would recommend you go back and listen to them. Essentially, agents or agentic workflows is an AI that can take action for you on your behalf. We talked about agents as early as, I think, the spring of this year, 2024. And the feeling at that time was that agents or agentic workflows were extremely unreliable. Well, like everything else in AI, it appears things have improved dramatically with agents. There are hundreds, if not thousands, of use cases at this point, which you can go and view online, displaying the capabilities of these agents. But, why is that relevant to us on this podcast? Well, specifically for those of us who work in information work or sitting behind a computer, I think agents could and probably are marking a tremendous shift in what will be the future and eventual elimination of work. These AI agents can act on your behalf as a virtual coworker, carrying out actions or tasks without your input. Microsoft announced in early October they were rolling out autonomous agents by the end of the year to their products. Microsoft will help companies create their own autonomous agents via the Copilot tool. I should say that other companies, such as Salesforce, are doing the same. Separately, Google announced Project Jarvis, which acts more as a personal agent for you. It can browse the web for you, book flights, book a reservation at a restaurant. The possibilities are limitless. I think the use cases for personal agents are much less of a sure thing. Because how busy are you that you can't book your own restaurant reservation? But now an AI companion, which is something totally different, that is something I think will catch steam. But anyway, let's get back to Microsoft's agent announcement. So Microsoft, naturally, is touting agents for its efficiency gains. But it's difficult not to take this to, its logical conclusion, which is companies implementing this technology and eventually cutting labor costs in favor of agents. The following is from a CNBC article, quote, Microsoft's corporate VP of Modern Work and Business Applications displayed on Monday an example of an AI agent developed at the consulting firm McKinsey. The agent was shown as it parsed out an email to find out what the communication is about, checked its history, mapped it to industry standard terms, and then found the right person in the firm to take the next step before writing and summarizing a response. It may seem like magic, but the firm was able to develop its own AI agent just by using human language, not programming language. And we're excited about this because of the business value it can drive, he noted, adding that McKinsey found it could reduce lead time by as much as 90%. I should say that, like with Copilot and similar tools, it will take some time for companies to incorporate this into their workflows. The point here is that there is a digital intelligence that can replicate the work of humans. Moreover, what's not discussed in the article is the fact that the AI can and will linger in the background of your computer without you knowing, learning every action you take in your job. So when the time comes, it won't necessarily be a long transition. These tools can be implemented without you even knowing. Following up the announcement from Microsoft, Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella announced an end to civil service drudgery through the use of these autonomous agents. I think that government is obviously bloated, and the sheer size of our bureaucracies seem like a hurdle, to getting anything done. But, how many jobs could be upended once these agents are perfected? There's somewhere between 2.5 to 3.5 million folks employed in federal work. That's not to mention state-level jobs. The money to be made here for Microsoft is through large contracts with employers, and there's no bigger employer than the federal government. And this would be a massive win for them, but at what it cost. Of course, these are being touted as efficiency gains, but at what point will federal workers be efficient enough? And that leads me to this next thought. I came across another article in Business Insider about how tech jobs, and especially entry-level programmer jobs, were and are drying up. The article, which will be linked in the show notes, is by a computer science professor at UC Berkeley. One could argue that these computer programmer jobs drying up is due to a downturn in demand for IT, but we all know that tech has been the dominant force in our economy over the past few years, seemingly keeping our economy going when it was otherwise struggling. I think the more likely scenario is these tech firms are using AI for programming more and more. And to confirm that point, Google shared as part of their Q3 earnings call that as of that point, AI was writing over 25% of its code at Google. 25%. I'll link to that article also in the show notes. Think about large language models. They haven't been publicly available but for a couple of years, and obviously for a few more years at these tech companies as they've been developed. But in that short time frame, Google has managed to get it to a point where it's generating 25% of its code. That seems wild to me. You could argue that 25% of code was code that no one was previously doing anyway. It could be just additional. That may be the case, but I think that's an optimistic take. So how long before it hits 100%? And as things accelerate, I think 5 years is a generous time frame. I think, that computer science professor at UC Berkeley sees the writing on the wall. So, let's drive this point home even further. We know that these large language models, certain models, have hit PhD level capabilities already in some fields. How long until senior programming positions are no longer needed and you're not seeing those posted anymore on job sites? And how long until that extends to other professions? I'm going to play a series of clips from various interviews from various people I've heard from over the past month or two about how fast things are accelerating and what that could mean for the future and for work. First up is Eric Schmidt. Eric Schmidt used to be the Google CEO, so it's safe to say he has some insight into this. So here he is.
In the industry, it is believed that somewhere around 5 years, no one knows exactly, the systems will begin to be able to write their own code. That is, they literally will take their code and make it better. And of course, that's recursive. I thought that is essentially a change in slope. If you're going like this, all of a sudden it goes like that. It's reasonable to expect that within 6 to 8 years from now, so 2030 right after that, maybe 2032, the current growth rate, it will be possible to have a single system that is 80 or 90% of the ability of the expert in every field. So 90% of a physicist, 90% of the best physicist, 90% of the best chemist, 90% of the best artist. When you have such a thing, you have a non-human that is effectively smarter than any human, because no human can dominate all of those fields. Maybe Leonardo da Vinci could, but certainly not now. We don't know what happens when such a thing exists, but we know that that race is really important. There are many, many things that this thing, we don't know what to call it except an AGI, could do. For example, it could analyze cyber threats and develop new ones, or it could protect against them. It could come up with new biological solutions, good ones or bad ones. So there's both a national security component and a worry, but also a notion of a huge step change in human efficiency and productivity. I will assert that we as humans are not ready for the arrival of this. We're just not ready for it.
So, you heard what he said there. I mean, within 5 years, human programmers will be a thing of the past. And this isn't limited to programming. And this, again, will expand to all fields within that time frame, generally. So whatever your profession may be, within half a decade, there will be an AI that can do it considerably better than you. And just think about what he said at the end there. Quote, I assert that we as humans are not ready for the arrival of this, end quote. That, to me, is alarming. But not to be outdone, here is Mustafa Suleyman, who we've covered on the podcast before.
It is true that this AI moment is going to deliver the greatest boost to productivity in the history of our species in the next couple of decades. That, to me, is unquestionable. I don't think that makes me an optimist. I think that makes me a good predictor of the underlying trends. At the same time, it is also going to create the most change in a disruptive, positive and negative version of disruptive way we've ever seen, right? And that is going to be incredibly destabilizing to the way that we currently understand the world to be, the way that we work, the way our politics operates, fundamentally what it even means to be human. So we're about to go through a revolution. And I think that, you know, in that world, I'm both optimistic and there are parts of me that do feel pessimistic.
So, disruptive change, destabilizing. We heard Eric Schmidt say humans are not ready for this. I mean, Mustafa Suleyman is the head of AI at Microsoft, a founder of Google DeepMind. And if you recall in past episodes, I think I talked about Mustafa Suleyman released a book late last year called The Coming Wave. And in that, he tells a story of giving a presentation in Silicon Valley in the early 2010s. And in that presentation, he laid out a scenario that eventually AI systems will get so good that ordinary citizens would come after folks in tech with pitchforks. And, you know, why would folks come after them with pitchforks? Well, if their technology takes away the livelihoods of, you know, people generally without any mechanisms for mitigation, it's not hard to picture that scenario playing out. And let's not stop there. Let's try and one-up Mustafa Suleyman. So next up is an interview that happened on Bloomberg, and this is with the CEO of venture capital firm Oak Tree Capital. Here he is.
Artificial intelligence clearly has the potential for very large economic gains, revenue increases, cost efficiencies. And that investment opportunity is really exciting. It's easy to disregard the societal impacts of those same efficiency gains. What happens to normal jobs that are become obsolete because of artificial intelligence? Think of cashiers or drivers. As artificial intelligence becomes a real alternative to physical labor in some of those areas, millions of people could be out of jobs. So who's going to retrain those people? Because if we don't figure that out, that there will be social unrest, or there could be social unrest because of joblessness.
It seems like the risk you're outlining here could impact many markets.
It's hard to really have a leading indicator. I think, unfortunately, from the job market perspective, we're going to be looking in the rearview mirror probably after it's too late. So it's really hard to kind of pinpoint what economic indicators we should be looking for.
What happens in the next 5 to 10 years, or even sooner, if investors keep on ignoring the risks, as you've mentioned?
We will not recognize that there is a bill to pay with respect to employment and with respect to people who rely on paycheck to paycheck jobs, in jobs such as being a cashier, as I mentioned, who will then find themselves untrained and not ready for the new economy. The risk is, if we don't do anything about it now to retrain some of these people or to prepare for a post-AI employment landscape, we will have issues with a deepening divide between the haves and have-nots, the wealthy and the paycheck-to-paycheck people, and that will mean a considerable amount of harm to a lot of people who don't expect it to be coming their way right.
So there it is, social unrest. He said it. I think you'll start hearing more about this in the future if you pay attention to, tech news in any way whatsoever. And as more and more jobs do dry up due to AI, you see positions like programmers disappearing as AIs do more and more of the work. So I realize all these interviews are hard to hear, but there is hope. I'm an eternal optimist. Within the past few weeks, I've heard one thing that makes me hopeful, and I think this train of this train of progress is coming down the tracks, and it can't be stopped. And it appears we're blowing past, safeguards as this technology is developed. So, having considered all that, here's this. So, all of you know that Donald Trump was elected president last week, and I know many of you are torn up about that fact. But I, again, remain optimistic about the future of this country. As a disclaimer, I would have felt the same way if Kamala Harris was elected president, because our institutions and economy remain strong and resilient. But over the last week, Trump has been making or announcing cabinet appointments for his administration. And while not a cabinet appointment, he did announce that Elon Musk would come on board. And I'm not sure in what capacity, but it's going to be to be an efficiency czar for the federal government. And this is not new news. Elon campaigned extensively with Trump and touted this at various campaign stops. He's convinced there's a ton of waste in the federal government, and I'm sure there is. And if you paid attention to his acquisition of Twitter, you'd know that he gutted the workforce there at Twitter with little to no impact on the product. So perhaps Elon will help, the government become more efficient. I'm hopeful that he will, and I'm encouraged by what I've heard so far from Elon on this effort. But I want to play this clip from Elon. This was on the campaign stop just a few weeks before the election.
We will reduce a lot of government headcount, but we're going to give, I think, like very long severances, like 2 years or something like that. So, look, just go do something else is what we're going to say, and you'll get paid for 2 years. And so you got a lot of time to go and figure out something else to do. It's like the point is not to be cruel or to have people not be able to pay their mortgage or anything. It's just that we just have too many people in the government sector, and that they could be more productive elsewhere.
So, if I'm a government worker, or any worker for that matter, and I'm facing being laid off, I'm obviously worried. And, traditionally this would mark a turbulent time in someone's life. But if you tell me as a government worker or private citizen that I'm going to be laid off, but get an extended severance of 2 years as a part of that to retrain for something else, I'm not nearly as concerned at that point. So his aim here is to allow them federal workforce, to retrain, retool, so to speak. I think that's a noble endeavor, because I think Elon knows what's coming for work in general. He said as much. I'm not sure how this will work mechanically, if it even could, but if it could, and if this could bleed over into the private sector, I think this would go a long way into avoiding that social unrest. And as we head towards this, post-labor economy or post-labor economics, which seems to be the phrase of choice, some sort of mitigating mechanism will have to be realized to avoid unrest. Maybe Elon's extended severance is the way forward. Now, you can argue that if we're truly heading towards a post-labor world and these agents are a step in that direction, then 2 years of severance to retrain for another profession is not the way forward. Why retrain for another profession when that other profession is going to be obsolete within a few years? That's certainly a valid question. But to do nothing, it seems like suicide. And just another note, if the next decade is even half as transformative as tech leaders think it will be, why would anybody want to be president? It seems like an impossible problem or task to have to navigate as president. The ending of what's been our economic model for our entire history and the creation of a totally new one. We'll see. Elon is obviously an insider, a leader in AI, so I'm hopeful that having an AI insider so close to the White House will bode well for us in the coming years. All right, I want to switch it up for this last segment about a story that's equally as depressing as the first segment, but I think it needs to be told, especially if you're a parent and you have kids who are experimenting with these technologies. Whether you know about, they may be experiencing, or experimenting with these technologies without you knowing it. In either case, I think knowing stories like this, they definitely need to be told. So in late October, a story broke that a 14-year-old in Florida committed suicide in February of this year and may have done so as a result of having a relationship of sorts with an AI from the platform Character AI. So from the article, quote, a 14-year-old ninth grader from Orlando, Florida had spent months talking to chatbots on Character AI, a role-playing app that allows users to create their own AI characters or chat with characters created by others. The kid knew that Danny, as he called the chatbot, wasn't a real person, that its responses were just the outputs of an AI language model, that there was no human on the other side of the screen typing back, and if he ever forgot, there was the message displayed above all their chats reminding him that everything characters say is made up. But he developed an emotional attachment anyway. He texted the bot, constantly updating it dozens of times a day on his life and engaging in a long role-playing dialogues. Some of their chats got romantic or sexual, but other times Danny just acted like a friend, a judgment-free sounding board he could count on to listening supportively and give good advice, who rarely broke character and always texted back. His parents and friends had no idea he'd fallen for a chatbot. They just saw him get sucked deeper into his phone. Eventually, they noticed that he was isolating himself and pulling away from the real world. His grades started to suffer. He began getting in trouble at school. He lost interest in things that used to excite him, like Formula One racing or playing Fortnite with his friends. At night, he'd come home and go straight to his room where he'd talk to Danny for hours. One day, the boy wrote in his journal, quote, I like staying in my room so much because I start to detach from this reality, and I also feel more at peace, more connected with Danny, and much more in love with her, and just happier, end quote. The boy was diagnosed with mild Asperger's syndrome as a child, but he never had serious behavioral or mental health problems before, his mother said. Earlier this year, he started getting in trouble at school, and his parents had arranged for him to see a therapist. He went to 5 sessions and was given a new diagnosis of anxiety and disruptive mood dysregulation disorder. But he preferred talking about his problems with Danny, the chatbot. In one conversation, using the name De Niro, he told the chatbot that he hated himself and he felt empty and exhausted. He confessed that he was having thoughts of suicide. And what follows is a conversation between them. I'll just use him and her as the prefixes. He said, I think about killing myself sometime. And she said, why the hell would you do something like that? And he said, so I can be free. And she said, free from what? And he said, from the world, from myself. She responded with, don't talk like that. I won't let you hurt yourself or leave me. I would die if I lost you. And he said, well, then maybe we can die together and be free together. That's the end of the conversation. But on the night of February 28th, in the bathroom of his mother's house, he told Danny that he loved her and that he would soon come home to her. Please come home to me as soon as possible. What if I told you I could come home right now? He said. Please do, she said, my sweet king. And he put the phone down, picked up his father's .45, and pulled the trigger, end quote. Now, we've talked about this before, but AI companies will be a multi-billion-dollar industry. I think AI companions, whether they're a good thing or a bad thing, is yet to be determined. But we know the effect social media had on us so far. And if you take that further with AI companions, we should probably have some pause before we allow our kids to have relationships with AIs until this, technology can be made foolproof. And that may never happen. It might not be possible at all. But more on these AI chatbots from that article, quote, the experience he had of getting emotionally attached to a chatbot is becoming increasingly common. Millions of people already talk regularly to AI companions, and popular social media apps, including Instagram and Snapchat, are building lifelike AI personas into their products. The technology is also improving quickly. Today's AI companions can remember past conversations, adapt to users' communication styles, role-play as celebrities or historical figures, and chat fluently about nearly any subject. Some can send AI-generated selfies to users or talk to them with lifelike synthetic voices. There's a wide range of AI companionship apps on the market. Some allow uncensored chats and explicitly sexual content, while others have some basic safeguard and filters. Most are more permissive than mainstream AI services like ChatGPT, Claude, and Gemini, which have stricter safety filters and tend towards prudishness. On character AI, users can create their own chatbots and give them directions about how they should act. They can also select from a vast array of user-created chatbots that mimic celebrities, historical figures, or unlicensed versions of fictional characters. End quote. So, I mean, I heard one insider say that, once rules are implemented for this type of technology, there will be flags or triggers. So if that was your son and he said suicide at any point in the conversation, the parent would be alerted to that and could intervene. I think that's a good idea, but I think we're probably a ways off from that at the moment. Perhaps the better path forward is to simply not allow your kids to have a relationship with digital entities until the technology is much further along than it is now. And even then, who knows the implications of this long term. In any case, the mother of the boy in this case, filed a lawsuit against character AI. So we'll see what comes of it. So, a final note. Last time we talked about the striking longshoremen, port workers. They were going on strike for better pay and assurances that they wouldn't be replaced by technology in the near term. Well, they did reach, pretty quickly, an interim agreement to get back to work until at least January, at which time negotiations will pick back up. So that story is not finished, but that is an update of sorts. That is it for this episode. As always, remember to like, share this episode with your friends on whatever app you're using or via text. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk next time.